Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and yeah, here it is. The promised Metroid Dread, no spoilers barred discussion. So if you plan on playing Dread but haven't yet, this is me telling you to leave and come back later. Seriously, I don't want to ruin the experience for anyone. For everyone else though, where to start? Game mechanics, specific bosses, the story beats, a news outlet possibly trolling everyone and making me feel like a dumbass? Why don't we just start with some things that I find funny about Metroid in general, then move on? You ever notice how often a Metroid game ends with Samus either destroying a planet, space station, or both? I get that the escape sequence is a motif at this point, but my gosh, whole planets! Girl's gonna give Frieza a run for his money at this point. To top that off, how often does she completely wipe out a species off the face of the galaxy? I get that she has reasons for taking out the Metroid, X, Ing, and anything else I'm forgetting, but genocide and galactic self-defense does sound a little ridiculous, doesn't it? We're still the good guys, right? I think we're still the good guys. Still, though, space becomes a much emptier place with each Metroid title. Anyway, you know what else is kinda funny? How Samus uses her arm cannon to upload and save data. Imagine having a gun that also acts as a thumb drive. No matter how many times I did it and how commonplace it became, I'd still be nervous about accidentally pulling the trigger every time. One last oddity are how strong the Emmy are. They're super scary, right? The Galactic Federation has spent so many games trying to create some super powerful bioweapons, and then they just have these things lying around but able to rip apart the most capable warrior in the galaxy? Seems a little silly, though maybe they just wanted more offensive options. Maybe they were too easy to hack, maybe they were too expensive to make, or perhaps, the most scary, they just didn't realize how dangerous they were. Like creating a kitchen knife for cooking and not realizing how good it is and cutting up humans. Wonder if those will come back around. As for the mechanics I wanted to discuss, I was going to include in my original review how, while I like the search pulse from Samus Returns, I was glad it didn't show up in Dread because the game was largely intuitive enough to navigate without it and would have made the game too handholdy if it was included. Then I finished up playing the game and had to discard that line from my plans since it did indeed make an appearance. I didn't mind though. It was late game enough not to be too intrusive, and given the timing of finding it, it served more as a way to go back and find missed collectibles rather than a way to cheese the game. Very smart way to utilize it. I was less happy about the power bomb. It showed up so late it felt like it was only there for two specific reasons. The first, to collect more ammo capacity for it, and second, to use against the final boss. It just felt way too late game for you to get much utility out of it, so I was a little bummed. Then again, something always had to be the last upgrade you get, so it was inevitable. If not the power bomb, then the screw attack, or the missile lock-on. Some of the bosses I wanted to talk about were Kraid and the control units. First, for the latter, I thought it was cool that they had some Mother Brain-like enemies in the game. I looked over some Metroid lore to refamiliarize myself before Dread came out, and was reminded how Mother Brain was a Federation biocomputer stolen by the space pirates and repurposed, so it does make a lot of sense that there'd be smaller ones in some of their facilities. Neat way to include Mother Brain without actually having Mother Brain. Then there's Kraid, which I still wonder about. Adam would sometimes give explanations for what was going on, so I was looking forward to talking to him after the encounter, but I got nothing. Then there was the gallery item that shows the Chozo chaining him down there, but it doesn't explain how he got there or why he wasn't still dead. He's probably not the only one of his species, right? So maybe it wasn't Kraid, maybe it was Kraid's brother, also named Kraid. It's bugging me a little right now, but I'm sure videos will start trickling out, coming up with theories or referencing some story material that's somewhere I haven't thought to look. And since I was probably smart enough to clickbait him in the thumbnail, let's talk about Ridley's part in the game. Or lack of. I have mixed feelings on this. While he's not the main villain of the Metroid series per se, he is the most recognizable and the one that has the most history with Samus. Heck, there's even a version of his theme called Nemesis Ridley. As they said in the lead up to Dread, this is supposed to be a major turning point in the series, tying up many plot holes with the Metroid, X, and Samus herself, so not having one of the biggest names in the series there is a little disappointing. On the other hand, you fight him throughout the series a lot. You supposedly kill him more often than you don't, so it's the same thing with the Metroid. How often can you bring something back and still have it be meaningful when you have to fight them to the death again? I think you fight Ridley 7 times if we don't count remakes? I believe this is the only mainline Metroid title where he doesn't show up in some way, shape, or form, so again, a little disappointing, but probably for the best. Other opinions welcome on this, though. Now for the sexy part of the video, the plot points. The Metroid have been killed off so many times by now, all but one in Metroid 2, then that one as well in Super, then they were cloned and killed more times than I can keep track of after that. Hopefully it isn't a lower number than I think, otherwise I'll look stupid and hyperbolic. In Fusion, Samus was saved by Metroid DNA. My point is, how many times can they come back and then get killed off again before we stop taking it seriously? Same with Ridley. I'm reminded very heavily of Sigma. And if they are gone for good, would the title Metroid even work anymore? Even in Zelda games where the titular princess isn't there, she at least makes a cameo after all. When the opening started up and they explained that Metroid was the Chozo word for Ultimate Warrior, I questioned whether this had been mentioned before, but more than that, I thought I saw a solution. Samus! She can be the Metroid, the Ultimate Warrior. Of course! I didn't think they'd take it so literally, though. Wow! I am a little curious how gene splicing works in the universe, though. I always considered Samus a human that was modified with Chozo DNA, then had some Metroid mixed in. It almost seems like an Uno color change, though, doesn't it? Whatever the last thing was that was placed down is now the default. The game treats her like a full-blown Metroid by the end. Of course, there have been so many Metroid mutations that maybe it was easy for its volatile nature to spread and overwrite most of the rest of Samus. And then that ending. That ending! Let's go over the story beats in some sort of order. Before you fight Ravenbeak and are talking to Adam, I thought it was weird when he started getting bossy, then when he started getting more domineering, it clicked in my head just before the big reveal, Wizard of Oz moment. It made me wonder when he started hacking the communication system. Adam was expecting that he'd have to talk to you that way, so that was nothing odd, and Ravenbeak could have started at any point along the way when he started adjusting his plans for getting the Metroid DNA in Samus to make her manifest it herself. Adam would sometimes say things that I wondered at the time how he knew, so I thought maybe that was a clue. Then I watched a streamer play the first part of the game and saw the opening cutscenes again. On her way to ZDR and then deep into the planet, Adam is using the nickname he has for Samus, Lady, then immediately stops when she starts interacting with him again after that. Such a small detail that I didn't think about it at all the first time through, that was so glaringly obvious upon review. I was super impressed by the subtlety of it. A similar thing that I did notice the first time was how Samus's reaction changes between the first and second Emmy. She knows that the Emmy are there, and while slightly defensive with the messed up appearance of the first, she doesn't outright attack. The streamer I watched was asking why Samus was just standing there and yelling at her to shoot, but that wouldn't really make sense. In the beginning, there's no reason to think that the Emmy had been hacked, and part of her mission was to retrieve them, I believe, thus her more investigative approach. The second Emmy, however, she immediately takes evasive and then offensive maneuvers because by then she has a pretty good idea what's going on. It's another nice little touch, all done without dialogue, that tells the story and what Samus is thinking without outright stating it. Then there was the part that really got me invested, the scene about mid-game where you talk to Quiet Road. There's the tense scene with the Emmy, followed by Quiet Road rescuing you and giving you that long explanation of what's going on. Near the end of it, when he makes almost a plea for forgiveness in what Samus is going through and what she likely still will, I felt myself getting ready to roll my eyes. Silent protagonists have a place, I won't deny that, but Samus has always been shown to talk before, so all of a sudden making her mute to seem more stoic seemed dumb. I was annoyed that after all Quiet Road said, after his whole story and his seeming attempt to make a real connection with one he considered his kin, Samus was probably going to, at most, nod, all in an attempt to keep the character too badass for words and ruin the scene. And then she spoke! In Chozo! And I lost my mind! Thinking back, had she been a chatterbox the whole game, her words would have just been another line among many. Maybe slightly weightier, but still just a bit of dialogue. That she broke her silence for this one meaningful moment in particular gave it so much more power, and I really appreciated it and wanted to stop Ravenbeak more than anything. Even more so when they immediately killed Quiet Road after that. Besides being kinda ticked, seeing how this was the one friendly presence I had found on the planet, I also thought it was kinda weird how this happened immediately after he had just said that they needed him because he was the only one who could control the Metroid for Ravenbeak. I consider that it could have been an X, but none came out when it died. I actually think the suit that attacked him was a full automaton, so it was likely directed by Ravenbeak. I guess he either assumed that he could direct the clones he was going to make himself, or clone Quiet Robe as well. But that brings us to the X. I spent the whole first part of the game wondering if they would actually show up or whether it was a ruse, and Quiet Robe did clarify that yes, they did exist. My first Metroid game was Fusion, so while it might seem new to many older fans, to me it's a big part of what I think of when I think Metroid, so I was ecstatic to see them again. Especially when the big cores popped out. I remember them well, and they're a huge nostalgia bait for me. Plus, their presence also raised the stakes considerably and was a clever way to make the fauna stronger canonically without outright replacing them. And when I saw one of the X make its way into the chamber where Quiet Robe's body lay, I panicked. I probably would have been slightly disappointed if the last 3 Emmy had remained off the rest of the game and was expecting that someone would turn them back on, but since Quiet Robe could control the Metroid, I saw some pretty nasty potential there. This sense of unease and worry carried me through the rest of the game. I found my curiosity building again when Samus stopped mid-attack when that one creature lashed out at her and her hands started glowing. I thought something like that had happened on her first encounter with Ravenbeak, so I thought that it might have been part of her physical amnesia manifesting and holding her back, though the last Emmy encounter revealed that it was her Metroid DNA showing itself. Speaking of, it was a tad dissatisfying that the last Emmy died in a cutscene. Sure, there was a counter chance at the beginning of the scene, which I did press for, but I imagined that the whole affair would have happened automatically anyway, so I have no idea if I timed it right, the uncertainty of it keeping me up at night. But still, after taking down the other 6, even with the first one being more tutorial, I wanted to destroy it with my own hands. Soon after that was Ravenbeak, where he revealed that he was pretending to be Adam the entire time, which we already discussed, and that he was also her dad. Or at least that she had some DNA from him spliced in. She also had another Chozo's DNA as well, possibly Quiet Robe to tie everything together, so it's like she has 2 dads, nay 3 given her human father. The Metroid DNA was from her baby. The dad thing does make me wonder though, since I don't think I've seen a female Chozo. Maybe I had and there's just no sexual dimorphism, so I didn't realize. Maybe it's because there are very few noticeable females in the Metroid series, mostly just Samus and, at least in name, Mother Brain, each standing opposed to the other, or maybe the Chozo reproduce asexually. Speaking of, do Metroids have gender? How do they reproduce? Since Samus is a bit of a DNA cocktail, could she reproduce asexually, regardless of her female form? Is this even worth thinking about? Anyway, Ravenbeak did the whole Emperor thing where he tempted her to the dark side, then moved to eliminate her when she refused. And then the boss battle began, which I have some problems with. The first thing is that even after beating it, I still can't tell you how. Ravenbeak would glow and a lot of my attacks didn't seem to do much, if anything. Since missiles explode regardless of whether damage is done, I couldn't tell which of his auras blocked all damage, partial damage, or just let me hurt the guy. As for the second form, I got a little bored moving around him in a circle as he shot at me. It wasn't hard, just repetitive, and when he would dash at me, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to counter him or not. Maybe that would have cut down on the length of the boss fight if I had. It didn't do the obvious glint thing that all the other enemies did. I thought I might have seen a bit of a small flash, but it might have just been me fooling myself based on my expectations, and the first phase was too tricky for me to feel cool with experimenting with it. The last phase was just more of the first, just harder with a few extra moves, which was fine other than the aura thing I said about before. I was really tempted to look up an explanation for this fight, but since I had resisted through the rest of the game, I just powered through after several tries. One of the key things that helped was use of the power bombs, which made going back for the capacity upgrades worth it. Whenever we would throw out extra obstacles like the homing dark energy balls and the mini sun that shoots slivers at you, I would go into a ball and let one drop to wipe them out and presumably do damage to him as well. And of course hitting the counters on parts 1 and 3 were also key. But yeah, how he worked wasn't nearly as clear as pretty much every other boss in the game, so while the fight was epic and had good build up, the battle itself was kind of a pain. Or I'm a loser that's bad at video games. Maybe I should look up a strategy now since I'm done. Then there was the following cutscene where Samus does her iconic line of Dragon Ball Z screaming, and she finally turns into the Super Metroid. The Metroid Prime. Some new kind of Metroid. The armor looks pretty cool, and there was something kind of familiar about it. I wonder if I saw some similar fan art that somebody did of it somewhere. I'm also curious what she looks like under the armor. Like, did her skin change too, or was the armor now her skin? Anyway, the ship crashes, and Ravenbeak gets possessed with an X that also has Kraid bits, and it turns him into some Resident Evil finale-looking boss. There was a part of me that wanted to fight him, and another part that just wasn't ready for a Stage 4 fight. I died twice here. The first as I pressed all the buttons looking for some type of feedback, the second time figuring out the right button but not getting the arm cannon to fire in time, and third, I just held Y. Like I was supposed to, apparently. Was kind of annoyed it was that simple, though I'm not sure if that was more at me or the game. Still kind of wanted to kill it myself, though. And then the planet started to explode and I had to run with the super, kill everything in a 5-mile radius blaster. I'm not sure if it was from the impact from the ship that set off the reaction, or if Ravenbeak had some sort of failsafe that rerouted the magma or what, but I guess because it was a Metroid game, the world needed to explode for an escape sequence. Which brings us to the final cutscene. When Samus entered her ship and was told that she couldn't use it without draining all the energy with her Metroid powers. Given that this was said to be the closing of the main Metroid arc, there was a part of me worried that this would be the end of Samus as well. Can't get a much more definitive conclusion than the main character dying, after all. Then the 1X that could control the Metroid, which Samus was one of now, showed up, and I became even more concerned. Had I gotten a bad end? But instead of what I was thinking, Quiet Robe smiled, the X left him, and by absorbing it and the Metroid controlling powers that Quiet Robe possessed, Samus was able to revert back to normal and escape. I'm still a little confused by this turn of events. Did Quiet Robe take control even under possession by the X to come to Samus' aid with the one thing he knew would help? Did the X sacrifice itself to suppress Samus' Metroid DNA, since that would have left her as the only thing that was really a predator to its species? Did it come to finish off Samus, only for its host to finally give out and giving Samus the chance to absorb it when it vacated the flesh? I'm partial to the first theory personally, though this is another thing I'd like more input on if you'd be so kind in the comments. And then she escaped, and credits. But yeah, after the scene in the middle with Quiet Robe and Samus' voice lined, I was totally invested. It was non-stop thrills, even in a game without the most cutscenes or a super heavy focus on story. I thought it was handled very well, I was super impressed with some of the details they included, and it's something that will stay with me for a long time. Beyond just Dread's story though, Other M went trending. This was probably due to the art you can unlock by beating the game under certain times, with one for each of Zero Mission, Samus Returns, Super, Fusion, Dread, and Other M, making people question if the game that many consider a spin-off that we all just politely pretend doesn't exist, despite having a burning desire to mock it, is indeed canon. Despite me having several holes in my Metroid history, Other M is not one of them. To get the basics out of the way, I don't remember it being super horrible to play. Sure, I prefer the 2D games, and Prime also played better, but I don't remember too many times getting frustrated with the controls or just gameplay being no fun. Of course, the main contention comes from the story rather than gameplay. The first thing a lot of people have problems with is how Samus gets direction pretty much the whole game by a man and needs his permission to use her weapons. Personally, I think this makes a lot of sense. Samus intercepts a distress signal, heads to the source, and finds the Federation already investigating. Since it's a Federation station and they're there in official capacity, they do have authority and she's there as more a private contractor. As for her not using all of her suit's functions, that makes sense because there were possibly civilians around, and if she just started using all her powers, she could damage something vital for life support, or if she even, say, used the power bomb without thinking, she could deep fry someone 3 rooms away by mistake. Of course, this logic sort of fails when it comes to the part of the station where lava's everywhere and everything is on fire, so that you're baking in your suit. Hey Adam, can I use my suit's air conditioning system? No, Samus, it could contribute to global warming. But we're in space. We're about to hit the point of no return on global temperature rises, Samus. We just can't take that risk. Limiting what she's allowed to use to have her lose her abilities without actually making her lose her abilities is clever, but the way they carry it out does make it feel more like Adam's being an asshole and kinda misogynistic, so yeah, I can't fault people on this point. Then there's the part where she fights Ridley and freezes up, succumbing to past trauma despite taking Ridley on multiple times and defeating him. Someone smarter than me did a video on this, Lockston over on Noggin, so I won't get too into it, you should watch his video instead. But it does make sense. But at the same time, everyone expects Samus to be such a badass and a pillar of strength that they don't like seeing her in a moment of weakness, which I also totally understand. Overall, people just don't like how she's portrayed in this game. Besides the examples I just gave, in general, her backstory is handled pretty weird. I played it in English, so maybe it had something to do with the dub. There was one flashback showing her time with the Federation. At the end of each mission briefing, she would always give her commanding officer a thumbs down, which I think was supposed to make her seem assertive and sassy, but the way it was handled felt more like a petulant child trying to act cool. It just felt like a good idea that was executed poorly. Another little point against it was that she would just turn off her Chozo armor sometimes to dress down to her Zero suit, which seemed kinda dumb and unnecessary. I'm sure that the argument could be made that this was done to make her more expressive during conversations and other dialogue, but I'd shoot right back that simply taking off the helmet could accomplish 95% of that. That probably had more to do with Team Ninja, the DOA people working on the game, though. Should probably just be glad they didn't strip her down to her underwear or bikini instead. If I want that, I do have the internet, and whatever happens won't be canon. Overall, I don't think Other M is as bad as people say, but I'd rather it just remain a what-if scenario than part of the main story. If it happened to get a remake treatment somewhere down the line, it could be a worthy addition if they fixed a few things, but as it stands, I'd say there are more missteps than successes with it. Also, Kotaku struck again. Since I talked about it in my main review, I guess I'll speak on it again and say that apparently I am an idiot who gets baited for hate clicks. See, they did another article talking about how Samus could emote more in Dread and maybe even smile. My initial inclination was to make a smartass response like, Samus does smile every time something good happens in Dread, but the best solution is to probably not engage any further. I mean, Kotaku posted something else about Nintendo forgetting to include Disney stuff with Sora and Smash, like the licensing issues weren't tricky enough with that character. So yeah, sorry to feed the trolls in my last video, this will be the last I talk about it. And this will be the last I talk about Dread, at least until the Game Awards come up and I say about how the show is a joke and is rigged and no one takes it seriously, but for some dumb reason I want Dread to still win them because despite all that, I know it brings attention to the winner and helps justify sequels. Damn do I hate the real world. So thanks for watching, maybe subscribe if you like this sort of thing, and I should have another episode of the backlog out Sunday. I need to play with my OLED more so I can talk about it.